I'll go ahead and talk about it again. There's 3 layers to the skin, and we talk about the 3 layers when we talk about burns. If the top layer is burned like a sunburn, if the top layer is destroyed, it blisters, usually blisters, and the top layer comes off. But again, if it gets into this, and the top layer is known as the epidermis. First degree burn only takes off the epidermis. Second degree burn takes out the second layer as well, and that's known as the dermis. First layer contains, it all depends on how old you are as to how thick this is. It also depends on what race you are. People of different races have different thicknesses of epidermis. African Americans, for example, have a thicker layer of melanin. They have more melanin in their skin, therefore this layer is just a little bit thicker. The dermis is a second layer, and the dermis contains just about everything that feeds the skin. This is the portion right here that we're talking about. If you've ever had a sunburn, potentially the area that was sunburned was swelled up, and the reason it swelled up is because it was trying to protect the third layer of skin, the subcutaneous tissue. Anyway, this probably swelled up to some extent. You got a little bit of swelling in the area. The second layer is the part that feeds everybody, or feeds the rest of the skin. And if it burns down into the second layer, of course, that is known as a second degree burn. You rarely get a second degree burn from the sun, because normally by the time you burn that badly, the second layer, or you've removed yourself from whatever the source is. Most burns are second degree burns. Second degree burns usually don't create scars. Third degree burns, however, do. Third degree burns are into the third layer of the skin, the subcutaneous tissue. This is where all the fat cells are. This is the portion that actually keeps you warm. The rest of your skin is just a protectant, but the third layer actually keeps you warm. So if you get a third degree burn, you have a difficult time maintaining your body heat, because that portion of your skin is the part that insulates your skin. Anyway, so a third degree burn, of course, will cause a lot of interesting problems. For one thing, one of the things that will happen is you'll try to create scar tissue, and they have to keep taking that scar tissue off. Otherwise, you will lose the mobility in that area. I had a friend that, when he was a child, he burned his back. He reached up on the stove. He was hungry, I guess. He reached up on the stove and he grabbed a pot and he pulled it down on himself. And unfortunately, it had grease in it, and it burned his back. So his back was all scarred up. And what happened, of course, right after he burned it, he went into the intensive care unit, and they took care of him. He was in the hospital for about 3 months, them taking off layer after layer after layer of skin, because his body was trying to repair it, but it was repairing it with scar tissue. And the problem was, of course, it's very painful taking off that scar tissue. They have to scrape it off with a brush, exfoliate.
So is that a third degree burn then?
That's a third. Yeah, he had a third degree burn. It was pretty bad. Anyway, so they're trying to take all the stuff off. They're trying to make it more flexible. Eventually, of course, that's exactly what happened. But from time to time, the skin on his back would form more scar tissue, and he'd have to go in and have surgery done, cut that part out, and then they would have to take skin from his leg and put it on his back. I mean, it was really a mess. This went on for the rest of his life, as far as I knew him for about 3 years, and he had the surgery twice while I knew him. Anyway, yeah, it was a pretty big mess. It's working. When a Pacinian corpuscle passes over a paper's surface, the vibrations detected by the Pacinian corpuscles informs the individual of the texture of the paper. And we can do that by rubbing our hands on the table. Is there any texture to the table? Is it completely smooth? And the answer is no. It is textured, and we can feel that, but if we just touch it, we can't tell. If it is textured, we have to move our hands over it in order to feel the texture. And that's caused by the vibration of the surface of the table. And we can do that with just about anything. We can tell the texture of something. Only vibrating stimuli of more than 200 hertz will pass through the corpuscle and stretch the nerve fibers to reach its threshold. Pacinian corpuscles tend to be fast responding and fast adapting receptors, and that's one of the reasons why you can't just touch something and tell what the texture is. You have to rub it. You have to create the hertz. You have to create the vibrations in order to get to tell what the texture is like. But it's fast responding and it's fast adapting receptors. Meyers corpuscles, another structure of the skin, are touch sensitive and have large receptor fields. They're fairly numerous. Meyers corpuscles respond to change in stimuli. They fire rapidly and they adapt very quickly, as most of your touch senses do. They detect localized movement, including yours. They are generalized touch receptors, more generalized touch receptors than Merkels disks. And of course, it's just another way of telling you, if you do anything delicate with your hands, the more sensitive your Meyers corpuscles are, the more likely that you're able to do this. If anybody's an artist, if you can draw, a lot of this has to do with fine movement. And of course, the Meyers corpuscles are telling you when there's fine movement that is involved. Merkels disks are less numerous than Meyers corpuscles and provide more sensitive information. So we're going from vibrations to more and more sensitivity. So the Merkels disks are the most sensitive of all of the nerve fibers in your skin. Merkels disks show adapting are slow adapting, so they give accurate information of what the individual is touching over time. Merkels disks also have a smaller receptor field, which gives them greater sensitivity to spatial resolution. So they're telling you what you're actually dealing with. If you are a sculptor, for example, of course, your Merkels disks are very, very sensitive. My Merkels disks aren't. As a child, I cut a lot of wood with a saw, not an electric saw, but with a hand saw, and with an axe. And then I carried the wood back up to the house, and that kind of destroyed all these nerve endings in my fingers. So I've got big knuckles because I've chopped a lot of wood. As odd as that seems. Ruffini's endings respond to stretching. They respond when the skin is stretched, of course. These receptors are slow adapting and so can give a more prolonged response to the stretching. However, due to the general information of stretching, you can push on your finger and stretch out the skin, they tend not to give a very complete representation of the form. So if you pick something up, if you just touch something, it's really hard for you to tell because you're stretching the skin on your fingers. It's really difficult to tell what the shape is of whatever you're grabbing a hold of. I do this to myself all the time. I have all these jump drives in my pocket, and I try to determine which one I'm grabbing a hold of by what it feels like. And sometimes I have to rub them in order to figure out which one is which. This one's easy because it's rubber, so the surface is different. And this one's small, but this one fools me sometimes. And that one fools me all the time. So, and of course, that has to do with Ruffini's endings. Nerve fibers from the skin, skin surface run to the spinal cord. Somatosensory impulses are transported to the brain along two major pathways. The dorsal column system sends to the medulla, just goes up to the medulla, which is in the lower portion of your brain. Then the anterolateral system crosses the spinal cord and ascends to the thalamic region of the brain. And that, of course, is right in the middle of your brain, right around your limbic system. It is part of your limbic system, the thalamus, of course. The medulla is much lower than that, just on the top of your brain stem. This system seems to mediate pain and temperature sensations. And this is really, really important because pain is extremely important. There are a lot of people that are in chronic and constant pain. And these individuals are trying to block this pain. There are various ways that we can do that. We're going to talk about that at the end of the chapter. There are some people that aren't sensitive to pain. They have congenital insensitivity to pain. Strangely enough, these individuals tend to die relatively young. And the reason is because pain is very important. Pain tells us when we're in so much danger that something horrible is happening to us. Something is ripping and tearing. It tells us to stop. So pain is extremely important as far as stopping is concerned. We all need to stop when we need to stop. Anyway, so when we look at these guys, these individuals that have congenital insensitivity to pain, we see a lot of scar tissue on them, and scar tissue in strange areas. It's really kind of odd. They don't register pain, and since they don't register pain, they don't realize they're hurting themselves. Therefore, they hurt themselves to a fairly major extent, and usually they die. They die fairly young because they have no idea that this hurts or that hurts. And you can imagine, normally, if you've got a cold or you've got another problem or a toothache, these individuals would have no idea because they're insensitive to pain, so they don't register pain. And since they don't register pain, of course, they have a far more serious situation. So they die young. It's really kind of a tragedy. But pain is extremely important to us. We can ignore pain, of course, and that's okay. But as long as we know that it's there, we know maybe I should stop. These individuals tear muscles and they don't realize it. So they go out and continue to do it until they've done a lot of damage to themselves. And so they die. Pain seems to have three purposes. In short term, we withdraw from pain reflexively to prevent further damage. I stuck something in, I got a splinter in my finger. I don't even remember when it happened. Maybe I'm insensitive to pain. That's kind of sad. Anyway, I've got a splinter in my finger. But for the short term, it tells us to move our hand. So if I'm hammering something and hit the end of my finger, I know to jerk my finger back to get it out of the way. Tell myself how stupid I was. In the long term, pain promotes protective behaviors that in turn promotes recovery. Because you're in pain, of course, you do things like sleep more. You try to rest the area. If you've got a pulled muscle, you of course need to rest the area. If you've got a sprained ankle, the best thing to do is not to walk on it. Of course, the pain's going to tell you, ouch, stupid, get off your foot. If you walk around, you may potentially be doing more damage. So pain tells us to stop. It also allows us to, it tells us to do something about the wound. We see this in dogs and cats all the time. If a cat or a dog hurts itself, it starts licking the area. It will lick the area continually until it heals, strangely, and that's known as grooming. It also will eat more food and drink more water. Of course, this will feed it and allow it to repair itself. So that for the long term, that's one of the reasons that we have pain. Pain tells us to slow down, get off stops stimulating the area because that causes more pain, and to rest and to eat more and to drink more so that we can repair ourselves. Demonstrating the pain not only acts as a warning to others of the same species, but it also elicits caregiving behaviors in others, including defending, and of course we see this in dogs and cats. If, especially if a mother has kittens and the kittens start screaming that they're in pain, the mother will come and attack whatever it is that is trying to hurt her kittens. She will defend them. In herd animals like cows, or I don't know if you've ever been around cows, when a calf started bawling, but all the cows will come around trying to get around that animal, so that get around the calf, so that nobody can get to it. I imagine the same thing happens to sheep. They are herd animals as well. But we see this behavior in animals. The females usually will go directly to the calf. If there are males in the group, in the herd, they will circle around the females. So they will create a defensive barrier around the females. But the female will go directly to the injured party. We see the same thing in dogs. We see the same thing in cats. We see the same thing in just about all animals. If an animal screams in pain, then all the other animals, the animals of the same species, will come to them and try to protect them. And of course, that's one of the reasons for pain as well. The initial stimulus for pain is a partial destruction or injury to the tissue adjacent to the select nerve fibers. The destruction of the tissue causes a release of chemical substances that activate pain fibers in the skin. One type of receptor that we're dealing with is A delta receptors. Delta just means triangular shaped. It has a large diameter, it's myelinated, it's quick reporting, and it represents quick, sharp pain. So when you injure yourself, if you've ever been in a situation where you injured yourself, initially there was a sharp pain. Now interestingly, this is fairly quick responding, but it goes away relatively quickly, or it can go away relatively quickly, especially if the pain, what causes the pain is removed. So you'll get a sharp pain that's almost immediate, but then the pain kind of goes away. And there's a reason for this. The reason is so that you can escape. You don't want to be so debilitated that you can't escape. But so your body will have this sharp report of pain, and then the pain will go away completely to some extent. So you're functional after that. You can escape, and that's the reason for it. So that survival tells you need to remove yourself from the area. A second type of pain receptor in the skin are C fibers. C fibers are relatively thin. They're unmyelinated. They respond slowly. They adapt slowly, and they provide a dull ache. Now we don't want the pain to go away completely, because then you won't do anything about it. So the A delta receptors tell you that you have been damaged, you've been injured, and then the C fibers will tell you that it's continuous, it's still there, and they will cause a dull ache, telling you, of course, that you need to do something about this. The A receptor tells you to get out of the way as quickly as you can. The C fibers will tell you that the area is still damaged and you need to respond to it. With the initial blow, damaged cells around free nerve endings release serotonin, potassium, prostaglandins, and leukotrienes. These are all kind of important, especially the prostaglandins and the leukotrienes, because we're going to take away your pain by blocking these. Prostaglandins and the leukotrienes. So leukotrienes, well, actually both of them cause swelling in the area. So what we need to do is, sometimes what we need to do is we need to reduce the swelling. We need to take the swelling down. Sometimes, especially if we're talking about brain tissue, Swelling in the area will cause the area to shut down. Of course, this is okay as long as it's not the area of your brain that keeps you awake, because then you'll be going into a coma. So sometimes what we need to do is reduce the swelling in the area. Once we reduce the swelling, the healing can start, and of course we need to heal the areas as rapidly as we possibly can. So we will give you a medication to reduce the swelling, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. The firing of the nerve endings can excite reflexive action in the blood vessels and other cells to produce inflammation, and inflammation is what we're looking for. So usually when you hurt yourself, one of the first things that happen is the area gets warmer than the rest of your body. And that, of course, has to do with inflammation. It's trying to protect itself. The human body is this amazing instrument. It's trying to protect itself by making the area too hot for bacteria to be able to survive. So if you've got a localized inflammation on your arm where you've just injured yourself, it'll be a little bit redder in that area. You'll have more circulation. It'll be warmer to the touch. And of course, what it's trying to do is trying to kill all the bacteria or cook all the bacteria in the area so that they can't survive. Actually, bacteria are fairly fastidious. They can only survive in select environments, and if it's too hot, of course, they will not survive. The action potential is reached, and the message is transmitted to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, and of course, this tells us that we are in pain. In the spinal cord, the impulse uses the neurotransmitter glutamate to transmit the information to the brain. Now we need to watch the process of this because we want to block pain. Eventually we want to block pain because if we're in a situation where we have chronic pain, we need to give you something in order to block that pain, to keep that pain from getting to your brain. So along with glutamate, substance P is released, which returns to the injured area through efferent neurons and induces blood vessels to double their efforts to promote swelling. So we've already promoted swelling in the area with the prostaglandins and the leukotrienes, and now the substance P is going back to the area and it's doubling the effort to create a swelling. If you've ever sprained your ankle, one of the things that may have happened was that your ankle swelled up as big as a balloon almost right away. And the reason is because of all these things taking place. So the substance P, of course, went back to the area, and it caused more circulation. Now, potentially you broke some blood vessels anyway, and of course that would promote swelling in the area. But when the substance P gets to it, all of a sudden, initially the area was relatively purple when you bruised it or when you injured it. Now all of a sudden it fills up with more fluid. The fluid that goes into the area is seral fluid. It's not blood, it's seral fluid. Seral fluid is the liquid portion of the blood without the red cells. It's the liquid portion of the blood without red cells. So one of the things that may have happened to you if you sprained your ankle or sprained your wrist, initially it was relatively purple and red, and then all of a sudden it was just red. Like it was hotter, of course, but it wasn't nearly as purple as it was initially, and that's because of all the seral fluid moving into the area. What else is happening? Oh, substance P releases histamine. And the histamine tells the area to swell up. And of course, this is one of the things that happens. Why does the human body do this? My goodness gracious, I was fine until my ankle swelled up or my knee swelled up. Everything was okay. Why in the world would the human body do this? And the answer is it's trying to immobilize the joint. It's trying to immobilize the area. It's trying to protect itself. And that's why you get all the swelling in the area. So it's the human body creating its own means of immobilization. Once it does that, of course, you can't move that joint nearly as much as you did before. All of a sudden, you're limping. You're limping instead of walking. You're not bending your foot as much as you were before. And now, of course, you can't do more damage to the area. It's created its own air cast, as it were, or its own water cast around the area in order to immobilize it. So histamine is important. Substance P is important. Prostaglandins and leukotrienes. So we're forcing the area to swell, and of course these are all the substances that are doing that. Substance P does not stand for pain. I'm trying to think what it does stand for. Anyway, it's a chemical. The P stands for a select chemical. An immediate pain message is transmitted to the spinal cord through A delta neurons, and if necessary, a persistent pain message is transmitted through C fibers. And if you've ever sprained your ankle, initially it was a sharp pain, and then the secondary pain was fairly achy, but it wasn't really the same sharp pain. You weren't getting the same sharp pain. And this, of course, is very informative to the individual, the doctor that's trying to take care of you. Because if you do have sharp pain, then potentially what it means is you broke your ankle, you didn't sprain your ankle. But if the ankle stops, especially after it's immobilized, if the ankle stops, the sharp pain stops in the ankle, then it means that it probably is sprained and not broken. So the degree of pain that we're dealing with is extremely important, as far as is very informative to the doctors. Okay, information travels up the spinal cord to various brainstem sites, where it is distributed to necessary areas to promote proper behavior. And of course, the proper behavior in this case is potentially some form of vocalization. Vocalization is actually quite important, or at least it was important to our ancestors. You can certainly, if you've ever been around babies, then you know that when a baby is hungry, it cries one way. When a baby is irritated, it cries another way. But when it's in pain, it cries a totally different way. So if the baby is distressed, that's one thing. But if the baby is actually in pain, we would all react to that, and it's an anthropologic thing. So if there were a baby outside, I don't know, the mother was changing his diaper. We don't use pins in our diapers anymore. What am I talking about? Okay, so she drops the baby. All right. So the baby starts crying. We would all four react to that, despite the fact whether you've ever been around babies before, it really doesn't matter. We instinctually will all respond to that crying. But if the baby were out there because it was hungry and it started crying, none of us would really react to it because, well, we would know that it wasn't a dangerous cry. So the vocalizations are actually quite important. I was reading in a book about World War I, and they were talking about Americans attacking German troops, and they said when the German troops were shot, they would scream like little girls. They'd cry. They would make a sound like a little girl. When the Americans were shot, they made a sound. They grunted. Ugh. They grunted. So it was really kind of interesting. They could tell who was being shot by the sound that they made, whether it was a German that was shot or whether it was an American, because the Americans would grunt and the Germans would scream. Would literally scream, and they thought that was kind of interesting. The pain message is transmitted to the thalamus through the anterior lateral system of the spinal cord, where it is rerouted to the cingulate cortex. This area of the brain is highly suggestible and can induce an intense reaction or a minor reaction depending on the attitude of the individual. So it all goes through the cingulate cortex, and once it gets into the cingulate cortex, this is the cingulate cortex right here. Once it gets into the cingulate cortex, you can decide how you're going to respond. Or in other words, at that point, you decide how you're going to respond, whether you're going to stay down on the ground and scream and cry and whatnot. That would be one way of reacting. Or the other would be to try to control your vocalizations and not respond very intensely. We have that capability of doing that. And of course, that's one of the things that happens during a crisis. I know you guys have never been in a crisis, but if you've ever been in a situation where there are a lot of individuals that are injured, one of the things that you try to do is you have to do what is referred to as triage. In other words, you have to figure out who are the most serious cases, who are the ones that you need to take care of first. And of course, one of the things that you do in triage is you decide who's going to die. I know that sounds horrible, but the reality is some people are injured so badly that they're not going to survive. And those are the individuals you need to not spend a lot of time on. I know that sounds terrible, but the reality is there are just so many people taking care of so many people, and you have to make a decision whether you're going to allow whether you're going to allow several people to die because you're trying to take care of somebody that's not going to survive anyway, or put those people aside and try to take care of the ones you can't save. I know that sounds god-awful, but the reality is when you've got all those people coming in, you need to decide who's going to live and who's going to die. Okay, so what you do is you try to take care of the people that you can actually save. If you have time, then you can try to save the ones that probably aren't savable anyway. Like, remember Aaron was telling us this story about they were in an IED explosion. The one guy was close to the explosion, and it gave him such a strong concussion that he started leaking CSF. He started leaking cerebrospinal fluid out of his ears, which means, of course, the concussion is so severe that he has not only fractured his skull, but it's broken the meninges. And in that case, of course, the probability of survival is is relatively remote. So he is what we would refer to as expectant. In other words, we know he's going to die, and there's not a whole lot we can do with him, with that select individual. So we just put him aside and try to take care of the ones that are bleeding profusely or whatever. So because potentially we can save them, but there's nothing we can do for him. He's going to live for however long he's going to live, but no matter what we do for him, he's going to die anyway. Wow, why am I talking about this? Oh, I'm talking about reactions, okay. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to respond to the vocalizations that people are making. So one of the things that we do is we go and we try to determine how severe the damage is, and whether that damage is repairable or whether it's terminal. And that's one of the things that you do. Wait a minute, I had another story. I can't remember. It just fled my brain. Maybe it's a better thing I don't tell you more stories. Anyway, okay. So this is one of the things. This is one of the things that happens. Vocalizations. So when you're in an emergency situation like that, or you have several people that are injured, you have to determine who you can save and who you can't save. And of course, a lot of that has to do with vocalizations. Sometimes the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the treatment. So the louder somebody's screaming, the more likely that people are going to go to that select individual. Of course, at that point, you have to decide whether this is something that needs to be taken care of right now and whether it's not. Chronic pain is difficult to control because even when a pathway is blocked or severed, the pain message tends to find a way around the block. And I talk about this all the time. And it's one of the reasons why we have such a difficult time dealing with pain. It's one of the most severe problems we have in the United States. In about 2000, they decided, the AMA, the American Medical Association decided that we weren't treating pain properly, that we weren't spending enough time trying to deal with pain. So in around 2000, they decided that we needed to treat pain more seriously. So one of the things that they did, before 2000, we gave people non-opiates in order to treat their pain, and of course it didn't work all the time. Somebody's got a back pain or somebody's got chronic pain. We weren't treating them, we weren't taking away their pain, we weren't taking care of their pain. So we started treating them with more and more opiates, and of course that's where OxyContin and hydrocodone came from, and now of course it's a really serious problem in the United States. We've got all these individuals who have been suffering from chronic pain, and now they're taking just masses and masses of these substances. So now we have a problem with opiates, whereas before we had problems with chronic pain. So I don't know what the answer is. We weren't doing a very good job of taking care of that. But now, of course, we've got all these people addicted to opiates because we are over prescribing for these individuals. One of the problems, of course, is, and one of the reasons that the pain message gets through, despite the fact that you tried to block it, is because the message is modulated at so many different points. It's very important that we get this information of pain. Prolonged pain messages will potentially require stronger and stronger measures to control, and of course that's what we have been seeing. We treat them with ibuprofen, we treat them with naproxen, we treat them with Toradol, we can treat it with opiates. Initially what happened was we were treating them with the lower level pain relievers, the analgesics, and they were working, and then sometimes the pain went away. Sometimes you were able to cure the situation. But if you couldn't, of course, then you moved on to opiates later on. And now, of course, they're starting out with opiates. People are screaming, I need more pain. I'm in a lot of pain and this isn't working for me. And of course, we're just starting out with opiates. Now we got nowhere to go. Because once you use opiates, you can't go backwards. You can't use a weaker pain reliever. You have to start with the weaker ones, hoping that the problem will alleviate itself before you go all the way to the opiates. Okay, so now we got a really serious problem because doctors are starting out with hydrocodone and OxyContin. I had knee surgery back in like 2005, 2006, and they gave me hydrocodone for my for pain relief. But I told you the story before, opiates don't work on me. So after my knee surgery, I took hydrocodone, and it didn't do anything for the pain. So I was in excruciating pain the night after my knee surgery. As soon as I knew that it was supposed to last for 8 hours. So after the 8 hours, I took extra strength Tylenol and took care of the pain without any problem. I know, I'm backwards. I am so backwards. Anyway, I only took it a couple times. After that, I just kind of toughed it out. Opiates have been used for eons as a means of controlling pain, of course. Opiates have a similar chemical structure to the brain's natural pain controller, the neurotransmitters endorphin and enkephalin. Actually, there are 3 of them. Endorphin, enkephalin, and dynorphin is a third one. Dynorphin has a little different chemical structure than endorphin and enkephalin, just a little bit different. Opiates control pain by occupying endorphin receptor sites of the periaqueductal gray of the spinal cord, and that's how it works. It blocks the pain right there in your spinal cord. However, sometimes we need anti-inflammatory drugs. One of the things we know about opiates are that they are not anti-inflammatory. In other words, they do not reduce the swelling. Sometimes we need to take that swelling away. If we can take the swelling away, then the healing process can start. As long as the area is inflamed, as long as the area is swollen, then no healing is going to take place. We have to reduce the swelling before the healing can take place. Sometimes the swelling in the area is causing more of a problem. In other words, not only is the healing process not taking place, but it also is irritating all the other muscles and whatnot around them. around them. And this is a problem that we've seen over and over and over again. An individual will have a muscle twitch. They'll have a hamstring strain. So of course we've got swelling in the area. Until we can reduce that swelling, the healing can't take place. It's irritating all the other muscles in the area. However, if we can take away the swelling one time, we can treat them one time. If we can give them an anti-inflammatory that first time, then the swelling will go down and it will stop irritating all the other muscles in the area. Now sometimes what happens is the irritation to the other muscles in the area are causing all the other muscles to tense up, and that is what is actually causing the pain. So once we can take the pain away one time, we can reduce the swelling one time, it all goes away. It's a miracle. I know, this is really kind of amazing. So sometimes all we need to do is relax the area once. A lot of times what's happening is, of course, the human body is trying to protect itself, so the muscles around it are tightening up, trying to protect that damaged area. But once we can relax those muscles, now all pain goes away. Okay, so let's take some anti-inflammatory drugs. So we take an anti-inflammatory drugs. There are a couple of them. Acetaminophen is an anti-inflammatory, as is ibuprofen. They're both very good at reducing inflammation. And the acetaminophen and the ibuprofen block prostaglandins and the leukotriene synthesis at the injured site, and of course that will reduce the swelling. So prostaglandins, remember prostaglandins and leukotriene create tell the brain that they need to swell up the area, that they need to maintain the swelling. So once we can block those, the swelling goes down. And once the swelling goes down, of course, the healing process can take place. Sometimes, if it has been a prolonged situation, sometimes the healing has already taken place, but the area is still swelled up, the muscles around it are still tensed up. So if we can take that, if we can reduce that swelling just the one time, a lot of times the pain will go away. With this knowledge, of course, we don't know what the hell's going on inside our bodies. We really don't know. So with this knowledge, if you tell yourself, well, potentially if I take just a couple extra strength Tylenol, I'm going to be fine. If you tell yourself that, sometimes it works. It works for me. I know, as strange as that seems. So the anti-inflammatory drugs, or the analgesics, are ibuprofen and acetaminophen. Aspirin only blocks the prostaglandins. It doesn't block the leukotrienes. So aspirin is not a very good anti-inflammatory. But acetaminophen and ibuprofen are. Okay. So sometimes you can, I think that's a B. Sometimes you can take ibuprofen or acetaminophen, and it will take care of your problem. Sometimes you can use them both at the same time, not taking them both at the same time. That won't work. But if you take ibuprofen the first time and then you take acetaminophen, the second dosage is acetaminophen. A lot of times that will take care of your problem completely. Isn't this exciting? No? Okay. Well, it is kind of exciting. Electrical stimulation of the skin, we can use what they refer to as the TENS unit. It's a transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation device. I was working in medicine when they first came up with this whole idea of the TENS unit back in the 1990s. Yeah, 1990s. The TENS delivers electrical impulses to the nerves of the skin in the area of the pain. The tingling caused by the TENS induces excitation of endorphins, which block the pain. So actually the TENS unit, while it is a small electrical charge, what it does, it brings endorphins to the area. And because it brings endorphins to the area, of course, that's a natural pain suppressant, endorphins, and of course that will take care of the pain. Of course, you don't need the TENS unit. All you need to do is rub the area. And that's one of the reasons why if you've ever hurt yourself and you rub the area, it seemed to relieve the pain. Well, yes, it did. It actually did relieve the pain. And the reason it did is because it is inducing endorphins to the area. I know, it sounds like a miracle, doesn't it? It sounds like magic. And the reality is, it's magic. Okay, so you can use a TENS unit or you can just rub the area. Physicians and researchers have known for a long time that pain can often be controlled by substances that should not have no effect on pain. So the reality is, we know that we can just give you a pill and tell you that it's going to work, and it does work, whether the pill actually does anything or not. Why does the pill work? Why does something work? Why does something that shouldn't work, work? Why does the pain go away?
It's all in your head.
It's all in your head, exactly. What happens is once you take the pill, whatever the pill is, the placebo as it were, what happens is it induces endorphins and enkephalins to be produced, and that takes care of the problem. Okay, so what about prayer? Why does prayer work?
Because you believe in it.
If you believe that it's going to work, it will work. All you have to do is believe that it's going to work. So if you go to a ceremony to heal yourself, it works. And the reason it works is because of the placebo effect. In other words, you have the capability of taking care of your own pain by producing enkephalins and endorphins and dynorphins. So you have this substance in your body that will block the pain. So why in the world don't you do that all the time? Because you don't believe, that's why. Okay, so if you go to a ceremony to take care of pain, it's going to work as long as you believe that it's going to work. How about that? Isn't that exciting? So we have all these capabilities within our own system in order to take care of ourselves, to heal ourselves, to cure ourselves. We can take care of all these things inside our own bodies, but we don't believe it. If we don't believe it, it's not going to happen. But if we do believe it, it will happen. So you can go to a ceremony or you can pray, and you're going to get the same. Effect. Or we can give you a placebo and tell you that it's going to work, and it does work. For the longest time, we were giving people antibiotics if they had a viral infection. Well, antibiotics don't do anything for a viral infection because antibiotics kill bacteria. They don't have to do anything to viruses. But people were being cured. Why? The placebo effect. I know. So all we have to do is throw pills at people. Sometimes it works. And sometimes it doesn't. Acupuncture is another ancient means of chronic pain control that uses similar tactile stimulation to induce endorphins in the area. Since chronic pain is often exacerbated by tension in the area, frequently acupuncture allows for enough relaxation of tension to relieve the problem. I personally can't see sticking needles in my foot making my headache go away, but that's the way it works. My wife has done this, and she says it works very, very well. And she thinks I'm a heathen because I do not believe in a lot of things. I don't believe in acupuncture. But the reality is that males and females are different. Male and females, humans are different. A woman can take a bath, a hot bath, and it relaxes her and it sends endorphins into her brain. And it actually works. Massage will do the same thing. Doesn't work on me. You can rub my body all you want, it's not going to do anything to me. I know, it doesn't seem fair. So my wife can just take a shower or a bath, and it pumps all these endorphins into her brain. If I do it, it doesn't do anything at all to me. It doesn't seem fair. Anyway, obviously there's something wrong with me. Stress, the body normally tries to control pain through endorphins, enkephalins, and non-opioid receptors. This allows the injured to flee to safety or not be hobbled and not be hobbled by their injuries. Of course, this is really important, what I was saying before. Emotion is a strong primer for either pain expression or pain control, so we can control ourselves if we want to. And the answer to that is we do. We control ourselves all the time. Okay, that was chapter 8. Now this is the 8th week, and I'm starting on chapter 9, so I'm ahead. I know you guys are all impressed by how well I'm doing. Normally I've stumbled over something by this time, and I'm doing really well, so I'm really happy. Okay. So the next couple chapters, we're going to take care of all the senses. Today we're going to, or in this chapter, we're going to talk about the chemical senses and your ability to hear, where all that comes from, right? Yeah, hearing, vestibular perception, taste and smell. Taste and smell are both chemical senses. The reason we hear things is because, the reason you hear my voice right now is because I'm creating vibrations through the air. And that comes in the form of, the loudness is measured in decibels, and the frequency of my voice is in hertz. So I'm creating air pressure, and that air pressure is detected by your ears as sound, specific sounds. Sound is a repetitive change in the pressure of a particular medium, commonly the air or water. And if you've ever been underwater and something happened in the water, somebody was talking or trying to talk to you underwater, you could actually hear them. And the reason you could actually hear them to some extent, not nearly as well as you can in the air, is because water will conduct the vibrations. And that's what you were actually hearing. You were hearing the vibrations created by the person trying to talk. If you've ever been underwater and an explosion took place, well, we won't go into that. There's no reason why you should have been underwater while like an explosion took place. But you can, of course, detect that. If you've ever watched a movie where somebody was shooting into the water, you can actually hear it when bullets come into the water because it causes vibrations in the water. In the air, air particles are moved by a vibrating mechanical system. In this case, it's my vocal cords are creating the vibrations in the air. But I can make other kinds of noises, and that's creating vibrations as well. The mechanical instrument moves away from the resting position and compresses air particles, causing the air pressure to rise above the atmospheric pressure. A single alteration of compression and expansion of air is called a cycle. Most of the sounds that we hear are a combination of tones, but some sounds in music are made by single structures and are known as pure tones. But we only see this in nature. The reality is there are no pure tones in nature, but only pure tones in music. So if you strike if you've got a stretched chord and you pluck it, that's a relatively pure tone. Most things in music will make more than one tone. You'll have a primary tone and you'll have a secondary tone. If you play the guitar, of course, what the primary tone is the plucking of the tightened guitar string. But the secondary tone comes out of it. The sound will go into the guitar and then come back out. And when it does that, of course, it changes the embouchure. It changes the tone. A piano is the same thing. A piano is a plucked string. The plucked string makes a sound, but of course there is something called a sounding board in a piano. And the sounding board is a large chunk of metal that the vibration of the plucked piano string will vibrate off of that, the sounding board, what they refer to as a sounding board, and that will cause the secondary tones. Frequency refers to the number of cycles per second that a sound has. Frequency is measured in, of course, in hertz, as I said before. Amplitude refers to how loud or how large the sound wave is, and of course the amplitude is measured in decibels. If you have a television set and you move the volume up or down, it will tell you how many decibels you're putting out. And of course, the higher the number, that means the larger the sound wave and the louder the sound. Here are some of the odd things that cause a lot of noise. Jet airplane taking off is about 150 decibels. You probably have your television set on somewhere in the 30 to 40, maybe up to 50 range. All depends on how much background noise there is in the house, as to how loud it is. Of course, I'm living in a Hogan, so it's that whole dome shape, and for that reason, my television is set somewhere in the 30 to 40 to 50 range. It really all depends on what was going on. Sometimes there are other sounds, like the air conditioner used to pop on when it was that cold or hot outside, and I couldn't hear, so I turned it up to 50 or 60 decibels. But right now, I think it's set on 38 or 39, something like that. Because it's relatively quiet, the television is against the wall, and of course, the sound comes out, bounces off the back wall, and then comes back. But it's a domed room, so a lot of the sound goes up. It has nothing to bounce off of. It goes up and it gets lost in the back of the house. Sometimes, and my wife has this problem, or I have my problem with my wife. If she's watching television downstairs, and I go to bed upstairs, this is in Iowa, sometimes the sound will funnel through the stairway up into my room, and it's actually louder in my room or in the bedroom than it is downstairs where she's trying to listen. She has a hearing loss anyway. She was in the military too. She listened to a lot of the things that I listened to. She was in just a single explosion, but she rode in a lot of very loud. The military doesn't try to muffle anything. I know that seems kind of silly. So their airplanes aren't muffled. She rode around in a Bradley vehicle at one point. So there's a lot of loud noises. You really can't, if you've ever been in an actual military Humvee, one of the military vehicles, it's really loud. You can't hear anything. I mean, it's not like you can turn the radio on and hear it, because there is no radio for one thing. Anyway, and that's one of the reasons why military people listen to music on their their iPads or their that's not right. What is it? It's an iPod, or MP3.
Or CD player.
Which they're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to listen to other things while you're potentially under attack. Okay, so we have all these noises. Stereo music's about 90 decibels. Office noise is somewhere in the 60 to 70 range. When you're inside the car, despite the fact that you're driving and theoretically it's quiet, you're still at 80 to 90. Of course, I drive that little tiny Miata. And it's a convertible, so I get a lot of road noise. So it's really, really quite loud in my car while I'm driving, when I'm driving to Albuquerque, going 80 miles an hour, or sometimes 81. The speed limit's 75, so I'm okay. Your bedroom at night is probably around 30 to 40 decibels. Strangely, there are noises, and you probably can hear all the noises. Really kind of interesting. My dog started barking about 6 o'clock this morning. I have no idea what she was barking at. Evidently, there was something in the house.
So going to concert will ruin your hearing?
Yes.
Like going to one concert?
Yeah. The first concert you go to is so damn loud. You want to cover your ears. You can still hear the music really well. But then the second and third and fourth concerts you go to, not nearly as bad. Those cars that have the amplifiers in them, where you can see the car shaking when it plays the bass. That's pretty bad for your hearing. Most sound is a blend of different sounds, music, speech, sounds from nature, and this is all called timbre when you put different sounds together. I don't have a single vocal cord. I have many vocal cords, and because I have many vocal cords, that's the sound I'm making right now. Anytime somebody speaks, you don't have a single vocal cord like a guitar string. You have several different vocal cords, and they all make noise, and that's where your voice comes from. There is an actress that has, something happened to her when she was a baby, so her voice is really deep. Oh, it's Emma Stone. So if you think of her voice, it's a little bit deeper than most females' voices. Now you'd say, you have to ask yourself, well, why do men find her sexy if she's got a deep voice?
The idea of having your father as an ideal.
Right, but it's not a guy's that want to have sex with his dad. That doesn't make any sense. Why would that be? Well, one of the reasons is because testosterone lowers your voice. So when males go through puberty, of course they have that high kind of squeaky voice, and all of a sudden, they go through puberty and their voice gets a little bit deeper. And of course the testosterone does that. Testosterone will cause a deep voice. So what does testosterone mean in a female? Why would men be attracted to a woman with a deep voice? It means she's got a high testosterone level. And if she's got a high testosterone level, it means that it means that she's gone through puberty, for one thing. But it also means that she may potentially be sexually receptive. Can I say that? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Okay. So there's a movie. There's a movie, and in the movie has Claudette Colbert, and she's got this high-pitched voice all through the thing. And then all of a sudden, she's kind of sexually attracted to Clark Gable, I think. Anyway, at one point she says, "What are you thinking?" All of a sudden, she's got this really deep voice, and everybody is attracted to that aspect of the movie because she has a deep voice. Anyway, not important. Yes, it is. So a male is potentially able to tell how you're feeling about him by the depth of your voice, whether your voice is deep or whether it's not. The basic sound that is made is called a fundamental, and the lesser additional sounds, the harmonics, are known as multiples. So of course that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the guitar or the piano. You've got the fundamental, the plucking of the string, but you have the multiples, and that's the vibration off the sounding board of the piano. The hearing apparatus, that's Clark Gable. Clark Gable was famous for his big ears, and that's why I put him up there. Look how huge his ears are. Looks like Dumbo. His ears are so big. I know. The hearing apparatus is the ear, which is constructed of three parts: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. What brilliant names we have come up with for the ear. The outer portion of the ears is the external ear, or the pinna, and that's what we can see. It also goes all the way out into the eardrum. That is all the outer ear. The hills and valleys of the pinna aim the sound waves into the ear canal. The shape of the human ear makes the human speech range somewhere between 200 and 5,000 hertz. More likely, makes you able to understand other people's voices and hear them somewhere between 200 and 5,000 hertz. And that's usually where people speak, between 200 and 5,000 hertz. Of course, 200 is really high-pitched. Some of us have hearing losses, and of course I have a couple of hearing losses. Most of it had to do with being around loud noises, so I have hearing losses at that frequency, at a couple different frequencies. One of them is at a frequency of a very, very high-pitched female. If you've got a really high voice, I can't hear it at all. I used to have a student that would, I couldn't hear her voice because it was at a select frequency. And she would hide behind another student so I couldn't see her mouth moving, and she'd say all this nasty stuff about me. Because I couldn't hear her. And then the class would just start laughing. And of course, I couldn't hear a word that she was saying. Sometimes she'd ask me questions, and if she was really angry, her voice would go up that high so that I couldn't hear what she was saying. So she'd start asking me a question, and all of a sudden, when she was really excited, really kind of bizarre. Anyway, I have a hearing loss at a select frequency. The inner portion of the outer ear is that which you can, an individual can stick a Q-tip into. And of course, you don't want to stick anything else in there. You may rupture your eardrum. As a matter of fact, they tell you not to use a Q-tip because potentially you could damage your eardrum. The end of the ear canal is the tympanic membrane, or the eardrum, which amplifies the sound wave. And of course, it's really, really important. If you lose that eardrum and it no longer becomes functional, you lose the hearing in your ear because it can't vibrate the ossicles, which is what happens next. The middle ear is a fluid-filled chamber, the three ossicles, and the eustachian tube. So it's these three bones and also this tube. This is the eustachian tube down here. And this is all filled with fluid. Ossicles is Latin for small bone, and it is. It's three small bones connected by muscles. The tympanic membrane touches the malleus, or the hammer, which vibrates the incus, or the anvil, which in turn vibrates the stapes, or stirrup. And that's all of those are Latin for hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Malleus, incus, and stapes. These are the bones of the ossicles. There's only three of them. The ossicles are controlled by the tensor tympani attached to the malleus and the eardrum, and the stapedius attached to the stapes. Those are the muscles that we're dealing with here. The muscles of the middle ear will contract and prevent the ossicles from being so sensitive to sound. So when you go to that concert, the very first concert that you go to, these muscles will contract so that when you first go in there, it's shocking. The sound is so loud. But pretty soon you can tolerate it. And one of the things that happens is these muscles will contract so the sound isn't so loud. It will contract so the ossicles aren't vibrating nearly as much. Time isn't talking. Okay. The stapes of the middle ear vibrates against the oval window of the inner ear. The inner ear will convert the mechanical energy of the sound wave into an electrical impulse that will be read as sound in the brain. So we still have ways to go in order to get the information into your brain. The auditory portion of the inner ear is called the cochlea. That's Greek for snail. The cochlea is embedded, and as you can see, it actually looks like a snail. The cochlea is embedded deep in the temporal bone and is about the size of a pea. The reality is that we not only hear with our ears, but we hear with our skulls. Because our skull is solid, but it will vibrate as well. So potentially, you can put something up against your skull and you can actually hear it. If it vibrates, you can actually hear it. Unrolled, the cochlea is about 1.5 inches long. The oval window opens at the base of the cochlea. The length of the cochlea contains 3 non-compressible fluid-filled parallel canals. They are the tympanic canal, the vestibular canal, and the middle canal. So it's 3 conduits. And because it is fluid, it collects vibration. And of course, it's the vibration that you're hearing. That's the energy that you're hearing. The basilar membrane separates the tympanic canal and the middle canal. The membrane vibrates in response to sound. Within the middle canal and on top of the basilar membrane is the organ of Corti. The organ of Corti is where we actually will do the hearing takes place. The organ of Corti contains sensory cells, the sensory cells of the ear. So we have all of this mechanical stuff trying to collect vibration from the outside, from the air or from the water, and it's trying to tell our brain what in the world that sound is. So it goes through this entire process in order to get to the hair cells in the organ of Corti. There are 4 rows of sensory cells, 1 row of 3,500 flask-shaped inner hair cells, and 3 rows of cylinder-shaped outer hair cells of 4,000 cells each. Now we're talking about a lot of different hair cells. We're talking about them being on the inside or being on the outside. Depending on where the hair cells are, that is the frequency that you will be hearing. If you damage any of these hair cells, then you lose the hearing in that frequency. I had a friend that flew a lot of jet airplanes. He flew a lot of different jet airplanes. Usually if you fly a jet with a select engine, it vibrates at a select hertz, at a select sound, at a select frequency, and you lose the hearing. I mean, he's sitting on top of this damn thing, and it's vibrating. So he would lose the hearing at that pitch. Now, because he flew so many different airframes, because he flew so many different types of jets, he lost hearing at a lot of different frequencies. So you would be talking to him, and you modulate your voice. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And sometimes he couldn't hear what you said because you would be talking in a frequency of one of the engines, one of the jet engines that he had flown in. It was really kind of bizarre. Like I said, the military usually doesn't muffle anything. They don't muffle engines of any kind at all. So the airplanes you fly in, if you flew from Albuquerque to where do you want to go?
Reno.
Reno. To flew from Albuquerque to Reno in a jet airplane, it would make a lot of noise, and you probably could only hear the person right next to you because the engine noise would be so great. But they have insulated those cabins so that it's not so bad. But military aircraft don't have any muffling at all. So most military people have a hearing loss of one kind or another because they're around all these vibrating things.
What about paratroopers? Would they have more of a hearing loss?
Would paratroopers have more of a hearing loss? They'd have a hearing loss at the frequency of whatever plane they were jumping out of. C-130, I'm not sure what they're jumping out of these days. Whatever they're throwing them out of. But they would also have a hearing loss due to the wind because they're falling through the air, and of course the air is getting into it's causing a vibration as they're plummeting toward Earth. The reality is, of course, they're falling. No matter how fast they're going, they're still falling toward the Earth. And until they open their parachute, it's actually quite loud. I don't know if you ever jumped out of an airplane. Dumbest thing in the world. Don't ever do it. It doesn't make any sense at all. You're trusting a piece of fabric to pop out and cause enough of a canopy around you so that you don't go splashing into the ground. Dumb as dirt. It's got to be the stupidest thing that anybody can do. So until you open your chute, of course, you've got all this air that's blowing past your ear. And of course you're falling at, 142 miles per hour or something like that. And you're accelerating as you go down. So the longer you wait to open your chute, the louder it actually gets. Which sounds pretty stupid, doesn't it? But once you open the chute, you're still plummeting toward Earth. You're just not going very fast. But you still have noise. And of course, if the wind's blowing, you get all that wind as well. So yes, they would have a lot of hearing loss due to the sound of the wind blowing past their ears. As odd as that sounds. Each hair cell has 50 to 200 stiff hairs called sterocilia or cilia. The cilia of the outer hair cells extend into indentations of the tectoral membrane that covers the organ of corti. The auditory nerve fibers contact the base of the inner hair cells, and of course that's what we're looking at. 90 to 95% of the afferent neurons are connected to the inner hair cells. So you have inner hair cells and you have outer hair cells. Most of them are connected to the inner hair cells. Each inner hair cell is associated with 16 to 20 auditory nerve cells. The afferent nerve fibers run to the cochlear nucleus of the brain stem. The outer hair cell is associated with modulating acoustic stimulation by lengthening and shortening to receive different frequencies. And of course, if we have a hearing loss, like your paratrooper friend has a hearing loss at however fast, the longer he waits to open his chute, the more hearing loss he has. What happened during World War II, one of the things that happened, the chutes open automatically as soon as you got out of the plane. So they had to drop you at a certain level. Now they drop you higher and you fall farther to earth before you open your chute. And that causes more hearing loss. One of the things you can do is you can dampen it by putting earplugs in, and usually they do wear earplugs, but of course it's not going to take care of all of it. As the stapes moves, it causes movement in the fluid of the vestibular canal. Different frequencies of sound cause vibrations that stimulate different areas of the basilar membrane. Higher frequencies down near the window, lower frequencies farther up. Okay, are you ready for this? The tips of the cilia of each hair are connected with narrow threads called tip links. As the cilia move from sound vibrations, the tip link starts a process of depolarization. Each tip link is connected to a potassium channel that, when open, depolarizes the cell. As the depolarization reaches the base of the cell, calcium channels are opened and the synaptic vesicles release the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Okay, so acetylcholine allows us to walk, to move our muscles. It creates memory in our brains, and it also allows us to hear. Now, the chemicals that we're talking about, we're almost always talking about potassium, and we're almost always talking about sodium, but we're almost always talking about calcium. So those are the three most important chemicals in our body: calcium, potassium, and sodium. If we don't have enough sodium or potassium in our body, then a lot of things aren't going to work. Our nerve cells aren't going to work. We need a select amount of calcium in our body, and usually we don't have to worry about that because we have this continual supply of calcium in our bones. And if you don't take in enough calcium in your diet, then you'll suck the calcium right out of your bones. And potentially you'll get a disease called osteoporosis, where your bones will actually hollow out. You lose the mass in your bones. Now, you guys don't have to worry about this. Isn't that strange? You don't have to worry about this. But white women do. Because the paler you are, the more likely that you're not processing calcium properly. So white people, all those very pale people, I do look kind of pink, don't I? Anyway, pale people, they have this problem. But primarily it's white women that have this problem, not white males. White males stress their bones all the time. Okay, we're going to stop right here. We're going to pick this up next time. These tip link hairs just drive you crazy. Because for a long time we thought it was the hair cells. But now we realize it's the tip links that actually cause the hearing. It's really kind of exciting. Okay, I'll see you guys next time. Go next door. Maybe we'll have more people. You never know. You never know. You know, people do show up to class sometimes. We'll see you later. I get tired of watching it on video. You never know what I'm going to say.